In my last video, I looked back at the top 5 challenges that product people like you faced in 2024. And in this video, I want to do the opposite. I want to look forwards. We're going to look at some of the trends that are happening right now and what is reshaping product management in 2025. So of course, no surprise, the first thing we need to talk about is AI. Now, I've been the first person to avoid all the hype around AI. You're not going to hear any hype about it. It's no fear mongering. I'm not going to talk about how it's going to replace product managers because I don't exactly believe that's true. And even if you did believe that's true, I think that's still several years away or a couple of years away at least. And it's not going to really have an impact on 2025 right now, right? But AI has obviously been here, it's been doing things. I've started to experiment with it, and I think there's enough in it that means that we can't ignore it, right? I think the first way AI is really reshaping product management is it's integrating itself into our workflow. Now, I'm still experimenting with it. Here's me experimenting with Miro's AI. What I did was I took a pricing survey that I recently ran for the product mentorship, which I've now launched, so go check that out. Small plug. But I took all that pricing data. It was a Van Weston drop price sensitivity test that I did. I put it into Miro and I asked its AI to essentially synthesize it, tell me what the optimal price point should be. And it gave me also a first, draft document. And so this is a good example of how it's integrating its way into our workflows. And I think a lot of this depends on your tool stack. Dovetail, another popular user research tool, I'm just mentioning it because I'm kind of talking about research here. They have an AI, their own one called Magic. Obviously Atlassian, Microsoft, Notion, the list goes on. They all have their own AI features. Then you can get into another realm of actually working with AI specific tools. You got things like Craftful, just on the theme of, product feedback and user research that can take product feedback, synthesize it, rank it, turn it into PRDs for you. You got things like Wizard, which was recently acquired by Miro, that can take prompts and build, wireframes and prototypes for you. And then you've even got the extreme end of this spectrum where you've got products like Lovable that can essentially build a fully shipped product, right? It can ship a product for you. There's a whole suite of products there, right, that are integrating their way into our workflow and into our lives as product people. I think another space that it's also playing that I think is interesting, I'm actually probably more interested in this space because I'll get to some of the limitations and challenges with all those AI tools that I just described, is for AI to be a bit of a sparring partner or a coach for you. There's AI products out there like Chat PRD, Lenny's Bot, even Reforge's Chrome extension that plays in this space. I think a lot of Microsoft Copilot and the work that a lot of the AIs inside Notion and Atlassian and stuff are doing as well, also, working in this space. And I think there's a really strong use case here, which is like having someone to be able to prompt me, give me, prompts and identify gaps and things that I've overlooked. Now, I mentioned that there's some limitations here, so a word of caution here. None of these are perfect, and one of the reasons why I really like that second use case more at this point in time is because of this. Through my testing of Miro's AI, and this is not a dig at Miro because I think all these things are just going to get better over time. It's just where we are today with generative AI. But I was actually taking the same post-it notes and I was putting through slightly different prompts. Now, these weren't radically different prompts. And what ended up happening is that I got multiple different answers. In other words, it synthesized the same data with a slightly different prompt, but literally just a different way to word the sentence. And it gave me different optimal price points. Now, this is important because we shouldn't take these things at face value. I think we should be cautious here because there is a limitation clearly that it's not perfect. And if we just crunch the data and we say, okay, that price is the optimal price, and I don't second question it, I don't, put a critical lens over it, then I can easily go down the wrong path. I think the upside of all this, whether you're subscribing to the, AI is going to replace jobs and blah, blah, blah space or not, is I think in the interim, or at least maybe even forever, it has the opportunity to really lighten the load and free up our time to focus on more high leverage work. That's what I'm super excited about. I'm excited about anything that can help us offload, admin tasks and, updating tickets in Jira, right? So we can spend more time on the high leverage stuff like creative thinking, strategy, talking to customers, etc., right? So I'm definitely not in the camp that it's going to replace it. I'm actually quite a skeptic on it, and I'm, reserving my thoughts around it. Because, remember Alexa, right? Alexa, Google Home, all that type of stuff. We all thought that was going to revolutionize everything. It's just turned out that everyone has bought really expensive, cooking timers, or maybe you use it to check the weather. That's about it. So, yeah, I'm glad I didn't buy a bunch. I'll put it that way. So I talked about this one in my last video when I was talking about some of the top challenges that product managers faced. I still believe this is going to continue into 2025, and that is commercial acumen. What we're seeing in the nutshell, I believe, is a recorrect. And as my friend Johnny Snyder, founder of Humble Ventures, said in a comment that I read just before I started recording this, my prediction is this will take the PM role back to something closer to its roots. There's plenty of chatter about the death of the PM, some fair, some not. I reckon most critical set of skills is see opportunity, develop strategy, execute the test, adapt, and scale. Of course, it's not linear, short, or easy like it sounds. And I'm not talking just about building it. Orchestrating go-to-market, sales, ops, and more is all part of it. AI tools dramatically accelerate the non-operational stuff. I have some experience with product design, customer research, strategy, and technology, and find I can go further faster in the early stages of new product innovation as just me with AI. Of course, tools help with the hard work of ops and execution too, but today and for a long while yet, this part needs teams and time. Interesting to see how that pans out over the coming years. So I always refer to it or explain it this way, that it's a bit of a pendulum swing. We started on a very commercial side of the fence with, product marketing, commercial side. There was a lot of companies that were very commercially focused, and Silicon Valley really disrupted that by being customer centric. What they capitalized on was this gap in, basically customer experience. The large incumbent companies were not delivering a great experience at that point in time. They cared more about their own, revenue lines and, bottom lines and profit than they actually did about delivering a great experience. So Silicon Valley saw this as a competitive advantage, and we've seen the rise of some great products. And I think it's important. We needed to put the customer back into the conversation, back at the center of the way that we did business and we did product. But what I believe is happening now is a bit of a recorrect, because what that's created is it's created a whole generation of product managers who have never had any commercial responsibility. Now, again, I think this was for a good reason, but pendulum kind of swung too much the other way. And what we've seen more recently with things like Airbnb's move, where they didn't get rid of product managers, they actually made product managers more commercial again and gave them more end-to-end responsibility.
So we don't have any longer the traditional product management function as it existed when you were here. But we didn't get rid of people helping drive the product. What we did is we combined what one might call the inbound product development responsibilities of product manager with the outbound or marketing responsibilities of product marketing.
And I think this is a bit of a natural evolution, because once upon a time, skills like product discovery, human-centered design, and customer empathy were highly sought after. But I'm starting to see that these things are becoming more mainstream. Product people are getting the grips of product discovery. They're getting the grips of, having empathy and working in that way. And what we're starting to see is that kind of recorrect, as Johnny was talking about, and I talk about it as well, where we're starting to swing a little bit back the other way. Just bring the commercial bit back a little bit. I don't believe we're going to go all the way to just being commercial again, but we are doing a slight recorrect away from only being customer centric. And I believe the macroeconomical conditions that we're seeing right now is part of the reason why. We've gone from this really funding rich environment where startups were flourishing and interest rates were low and all that type of stuff. Inflation was low as well, to a world where, funding is being constrained, startups are going under, there's mass layoffs, inflation's really high. So all these things start to create more constraints on the business. And when you move into a more constrained world, businesses become more focused on those things because growth isn't so easy anymore. We start to focus more on the commercial aspects of the role. I've got a bunch of videos on here about product strategy and some of those things, but I'll also include a bunch of links to some helpful things in the description below. So, continue on this theme of working in an increasingly constrained environment. I also believe that this will lead to and has already led to a decrease in empowerment. Now, I use the word empowerment here. I actually don't like using it because, like, what do you mean by it? Empowered to do what? So, I just want to frame this a little bit and explain what I mean by this kind of decrease in empowerment that's happening, which is not really a decrease in empowerment, but I'm going to explain it. So, I love this model by John Cutler, which he refers to as the mandate levels. The reason why this is a powerful model and reason why I say I don't like the word empowerment is empowered to do what? There's a very big difference between, say, down here where we're saying generate some long-term or short-term business outcome, right? Like we're really talking about some type of revenue goal, like grow annual recurring revenue from to blah, right? Now that's very different than going down, say, to here, which is like solve this open-ended customer problem. Now, the reason why I say empowered to do what, because it's like, are we empowered to, maybe create new products, move the business into new markets, like maybe go international or something? Or are we only empowered to find solutions to this customer problem? Now, there's no right or wrong here. We can really frame this as just zooming in and out. And there are times where, being down the bottom here it makes total sense. And that's often in those less constrained environments because we need to have the luxury of time to be able to explore because we need to explore across all of this to find a solution that's kind of up here, right? So when you give a very broad outcome to a team or to an individual, there is a lot of space underneath that. They need time to explore that space, to find opportunities, to prioritize, to work out, okay, what's going to create the most short-term impact? What are those leverage points? What's going to move certain metrics? How do we segment users? How do we then find a customer problem within that, et cetera, et cetera? That takes time. Now, leaders can do a little bit of the heavy lifting and they can kind of split this and start, say, here, and they can give a more constrained problem to a team. Now, this isn't disempowering. It might feel like it. So, this is the important part here. It might feel like disempowering, but they haven't told you what to do. They've just constrained the boundaries. And by constraining the boundaries, it means that there's less, place for you to explore. And what I tend to find in my experience has been the case that as we move into a more constrained environment, we tend to start to zoom in and we start to move down this stack. Now, you can get really, really bad and you can move all the way down here. And this is when you definitely get into the disempowered space where leaders are basically just telling you what to do. They're like, build this thing based on these specs. But even then, you could argue that there's an element of empowerment around that and autonomy because, people will say, well, you're still empowered to work out the how. But, I don't like that anyways. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we tend to zoom in and out based on our environment. And when resources are plentiful and business is great and we're doing well, we tend to give more freedom and we tend to be further down here. And then as things get more constrained, we tend to move up. And this is what I expect to happen. And I'm already seeing happen with a lot of my clients and the people that I coach and the companies I work with. I'm already seeing this shift. And some of the work I'm doing with product leaders is to help them make this shift because they just don't have the luxury. Now, what does this all mean for you? There's a part of you that can be upset about it and feel like you're being disempowered. But I hope that the reframe that I just given you is actually useful. And you can hopefully reframe this as just product leaders and the leaders in the company started to zoom in and start to constrain those boundaries and not necessarily disempower you. Yes, they've taken some decisions out because they've constrained things, but we have to because of the context of the business. Now, personally, I kind of take this as a bit of an imperative to deliver impact. Because if I can create a positive impact to the business, we can turn things around, then we can start to move back to that environment where boundaries are more loose and we have more freedom of movement and we're in a happier place. Now, another thing that you can do, which kind of ties back into the previous point about being more commercial, is being able to demonstrate the impact of your work. So I want to walk you through an exercise that I've done with so many product people over the last 12 to 18 months, probably more times in the last 12 months than I have in the last 4 to 5 years. And it's this one. So what it is basically us creating a narrative and building a really strong linkage between the work that we're doing today and meaningful outcomes to both our customers and the business, right? So don't let this picture deceive you. When we actually started here, we actually started with just this black post-it note down the bottom. Essentially, they're piloting this new facial recognition feature that they can use, and they're hoping that it's going to deliver some great results to the business. Cool. So let's talk about what some of those results are. And what we did was we basically mapped out, well, what are some of the customer pain points that we're solving? Once we kind of got that, what are some of the business pain points? And then what are some of those ultimate lag in business outcomes? And what you can see we've done here is almost follow those mandate levels. We've worked our way up that chain. What's great about this is now this product manager can actually go to the business and say, well, this is going to lead to this, and it's going to lead to this, and then ultimately lead to these more lagging results, right? And then what they're going to be able to do now that they have this mental model and they have this all laid out is we can make sure that we have metrics down to this across the whole stack, but in particular down at this level. And then even if these lagging things don't happen, for example, if conversion doesn't increase and then the ultimate dollar side of that fence or these don't decrease, at least we can start to measure down at this level, which means that we'll be able to have a conversation about whether this individual thing is actually creating any impact or not. Because some of these things are really big and lagging, and there's multiple contributors to them. So maybe you're actually doing really, really well, and it's actually everybody else that is doing poorly that's bringing things like conversion down. Because you've got to remember, especially inside larger organizations, there's many things going on at once. So your ability to draw, maybe not necessarily perfect causation, but at least correlation between something that you did and some types of impact is going to put you in a really good position. It's going to help you be more commercially minded, and it's going to help you be able to have those meaningful conversations with your stakeholders and those around you to be able to demonstrate that impact. I talked about this in another video, which I'll link up here, but this can also help you build trust and rapport and hopefully move your way up those mandate levels too, because then it can help leaders be able to give you more freedom of movement. If you're looking for a tool that can help you achieve this, I'll give a shout out to Vistally right here. Full disclosure though, I am an advisor for them, but I joined them because I actually believe in the tool, not because of some type of sponsorship or something like that. That's why I'm an advisor. They're not like sponsoring this video or anything like that, but they're definitely a tool that is worth checking out if you want to try to automate all of this and you don't want to put it into like Miro boards and that type of stuff. Okay, so this notion might be new to you, but as your role becomes more broader, when you move into a product leadership position and you move away from, say, like one product to owning a product portfolio, you need to start to balance investment across multiple products, across multiple bets within that product. This then often requires you to start to think about those really far time horizons. And what this tends to lead to in many cases is standing up a team or investing into generally a team to look at those far time horizons. So AI is a good example of this. And I had a company that I coached back in 2019 that stood up a team that had been looking at AI since then, right? So when the wave came for AI, they were more than prepared for it. And they weren't like some, hip tech company. They were in fact a largely government funded media company. Now, the reason why they managed to do this was because of product leadership. They had good product leaders in there that knew that they needed to basically balance this portfolio and they needed to invest some percentage of their, money that they have, their budget to explore, right? And we often, I've started to frame these as explore teams. So we have these teams that start to look and explore these long time horizons and they look at spaces like AI as an example. Now, I understand why this construct's not super common if you haven't come across it yet. I get it. There's a whole number of reasons why. The primary one being that we often have to rationalize, right? Like if you're invested into this team, like what are they doing for us? You have to tell us what impact they're trying to create. Now, this is really hard with these types of explore teams, which is why these teams are usually really lean. Like I'm talking 3 to 5 people inside these teams. It's like a product trio, plus a few people if necessary. So they're usually really lean teams. But another way to explain these teams is they're looking at a far time horizon. They're doing exploratory work more so than exploitative work, if you understand that framing. And what that means is that the spaces that they're looking into are highly ambiguous. And as a result of that, there is a high degree of failure. So there's a good chance that they're going to look at 100 ideas and one of them is going to be like something, right? That's worth doing more in and actually creating an impact. So I get why it's really hard to invest in these spaces, and I get why product leaders just don't do it. And for some of you thinking, trying to draw parallels here, yes, this is quite similar to those like old school innovation labs. The difference here though is we tend to put them close to the product groups or the product teams that are actually going to implement and do the work. And we tend to make these teams really, really lean and they sit within the product portfolio. So they don't get separated. I think that's a really key thing and a key difference that happens here because we don't want to separate them. We want to keep the product org close together and not lock them away, right? Because the idea is that they need to feed off each other's and share learnings and share knowledge and that type of stuff. But I put this in here because I believe we're going to start to see more and more of these teams get stood up. Because I think more and more companies have realized they've missed the AI wave, or I don't think you've missed it, but they're realizing that they're late to the party and they want to jump on board. So because of that, they need to stand up a team. And even if it's a team that just looks at AI and explores what's possible with AI, is there use cases for AI inside of our company, for our customers, that type of stuff, I can just see more and more companies do it, and more companies are doing it, I should say. This is good news, I think. One, I think it hopefully would teach some companies a hard lesson that maybe they should have been like that organization that invested into it since 2019 or even earlier. But it's also good news for product people who are, better suited for this type of work, because this type of work is really different than the product work we tend to find in normal product teams. This is really quick and dirty work, right? They're not trying to build high quality products. In fact, it's the complete opposite. We want them to prototype things, break things. We want them to move really, really fast because there's a high degree of ambiguity. They need to create clarity and they don't know what's going to work, right? So we're kind of looking for them to throw 100 things at the wall, like I said, and for one of them to pan out. That's what we want them to do. So we want them to really discard things as quickly as possible and to move really, really fast. That means the engineers you put in there, we want engineers who maybe they're not so detail orientated. We want engineers who are really scrappy. They can whip up some code really, really quickly, put something out there. And, some other engineers probably going to look at it and scream because it's filled with tech debt, but that's what we want. We don't want no tech debt. We don't want high quality code because we might bin it. It might not actually work. Same with design and stuff. We need people who are really rapid at prototyping, product people as well. So to paint a picture in case this might be you and you've never heard of this before, when I've hired in the past for this and I've helped companies hire as well, I'm looking for people like product people who have a high degree of agency. They don't need a lot of direction. They can deal with that high degree of uncertainty. In fact, I want them to be people who can bring clarity and direction when there is none, right? Like when it's all chaos, like what do they do? Can they bring order? Can they bring clarity? Can they create a direction and rally people behind it? I'm also looking for people who are really scrappy. As I said, they're resourceful. They can kind of, for example, they don't need a research ops team to go and, facilitate customer interviews for them or to schedule interviewing. Like I want people who can, jump on LinkedIn or something and go door knocking, and they're just resourceful. They'll pull people together. They'll find a way to validate this. From a more tactical skills point of view, I'm looking for them to be really well versed in like market validation, strategy, of course, research, that side of the fence. Like they're really like early in the process. We want them to really kind of whip up a solution concept and bring it to market as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So the good news here is if all that resonates with you, that's where you like to play. I like to believe that this is going to open more opportunities for people like you. Definitely more roles, more companies adopting it, hopefully more room for you to play in this space. So the last trend I'm starting to see is this shift away from the whole move fast and break things. Now, this is probably a little bit controversial and I'd love to hear your take on it, but that's been popularized for many years, the whole lean startup movement. But what I'm starting to see is a shift. And I've spoken to a few other people and they're seeing this shift as well. And one of the primary reasons why I think this shift is happening is because customer expectations have just significantly shifted. All you need to do is go back a couple of years, look at some old websites, look at some apps from like the early app stores. Like I think the iPhone came out in 2008, somebody will correct me, but it wasn't that long ago. And if you look at some of the apps that were out back then versus now, they're a world of difference. In the Kano model, it talks about how features and functionalities inside products will start to degrade over time. So in other words, things that used to be a delighter will eventually become a base expectation given enough time. I like to use Uber as an example for this. Now, when Uber launched and they had the Uber Maps, that was like mind blowing. You can see your ride in real time. You know exactly where it is. You can call them and be like, hey, mate, you took the wrong turn. Can you turn back and come here? I'm on the other side of the road or something like that. But being able to see those things in real time was revolutionary. Now, if we fast forward to today, if you were to download a ride sharing app that didn't have that, I'm sure you'll be pretty underwhelmed. And this is because the bar has just kept moving up and up and up. And as a result, I don't think it's enough anymore for you to build this scrappy thing and put it out there, not in certain circumstances, which we're kind of going to get to. So what I'm seeing as a result of all that is more and more companies adopt these like Apple style launches, get on stage, do a big launch event. And what they're doing is they're doing a lot of that iterating, that lean startup movement, and agile is really popularized. They're doing it behind closed doors. They're doing it in alpha groups, beta groups. They're having user communities, and they're just doing like lots of user testing and iterations with users before they get up on stage and do the ta-da, big kind of launch, right? And this is a really nuanced thing because it's not like they're not iterating. It's not like they're not kind of doing the whole MVP concept. They are absolutely still doing those things. The difference is trying to nail it before they scale it. And I don't have any hard data on this, but I suspect companies have realized that they can get a higher ROI or return on investment by spending time behind closed doors, perfecting it and making something really, really awesome, and then launching that awesome thing up on stage, throwing the marketing book at it and putting all this weight behind, marketing and launch efforts, that they're going to get like this huge amount of return on investment in that versus using that lean startup type playbook where they would launch an MVP, they'll get some people to sign up, they'll then iterate on it and they'll grow through those iterations and slowly improving it and letting that product evolve over time. Now, I don't think that this is the perfect playbook for every single thing. Everything's nuanced and it's always contextual. Obviously, you're always going to have these small products, these small features that putting all this marketing and launch effort behind it is just not going to make sense. It's not going to be the thing that you do. But there are going to be things where it does make sense to do this. Equally, it also depends on what type of company you are and where you are in the life cycle. If we take a small startup as an example, you probably got 5 customers. Half of those customers are your mom, your dad, your cousins, whatever, right? You putting something out there that is super underwhelming is not a big risk. You're not going to annoy a lot of people. You're going to get feedback nonetheless. It's probably okay. So if you're a super early stage startup, then I think that's okay. But if you have distribution, for example, a lot of these content creators are starting to build their own products and companies. So if you have distribution, or if you have like a community maybe or something like that, distribution, all kinds of distribution channels, or if you are an existing company that has a lot of customer base, which is a distribution channel too, because you can launch those customers and you can get customers because you've got brand, like you got leverage in some ways because you're a pre-existing company. If those things are true, then I think, albeit away from those small things, this starts to make more sense. An example that I can think of, which is because it's just a super recent example, is Google's AI. Now they've corrected this, but if anybody remembers, at the beginning of last year, 2024, Google released the AI at the top of their search. So when you search something, it gives you this AI results. Now, when they originally launched it, it was given some really questionable results. And essentially, in a nutshell, what it was doing was it was going through Reddit and it was pulling up, basically trolls, people being a troll and terrible humans, and given terrible answers. And they'll treat those answers as fact, and they'll serve those answers to users. And there were some really bad examples of this, some funny examples, so it's definitely worth Googling. But let me just put this into perspective. Google has over 180,000 employees today. They could have taken, not even everyone in the company, they could just take a portion of people in the companies. They could have given those people early access to this Google AI, and they could have just let it run for a week or two with just employees using it. And I can almost guarantee that they would have unearthed this in that time. And they would have saved them all of the embarrassment of launching it and then having to basically take it off and then spend several months fixing it only to relaunch it again. They could have actually just, done that and then launched it. And they probably would have got it out the door sooner than what they ended up doing now, because they put it out too early and had to take it down and then had to fix it. Just to tell another example of this, as to why sometimes this is a bad idea. I got told this story. I'll leave all names out of it for their own privacy and stuff. But I got told this story where a company was testing their pricing. So super common, we test pricing. I talked about that at the beginning. Talked about doing a pricing survey. I did a pricing survey though. But they were doing some A/B testing on the website around pricing. So they'll display in different prices a price that they wanted to test. They wanted to see if it would be better. And they'll basically A/B testing them. Now, they ended up having some customers reach out to them to say, hey, I was on your website yesterday and I went to buy today and the price is different. Like, what the hell? Why is the price different? Why is it more expensive? Or, if it was cheaper, they probably just bought. But if it was more expensive, that's what they were complaining about. Now, thankfully, this didn't happen to them. But you can imagine someone turning that into a viral post and it just, going nuts. And now you've got a huge amount of like PR damage on your hands. Now, the mistake that they made around this was they weren't segmenting, right? They just randomized. So if you hit their website, you just had like a coin flip chance that you'll get served a new pricing page. And what ended up happening was a percentage of people saw both pricing pages, and that is not good for you, right? Now, there's a lesson there with A/B testing and how you implement it. But I think this is another good example of where we just need to be careful about actually going out and doing these things in the wild and having that negative consequence on our customers and the market. So, of course, this is not applicable to everything. It's super nuanced, but I'm definitely seeing this trend where we're moving towards more product launches. So if you think about from a product management point of view, it starts to go back towards what Brian Chesky was talking about, that Airbnb shift. I think you need to get more across go-to-market stuff. There's going to be more demand for, understanding this and being able to work within these nuances. I think the playbook is changing a little bit as well. I think it means as individual product people, we are going to do less of that MVP and iterating out in public. Of course, we're going to iterate, but we're going to do more scale it before we nail it. We're going to spend more time behind the scenes. We're going to leverage things like beta groups, early access, that type of stuff to get that feedback before we bring it out to the wider world. There's so many techniques in this, things like scaling stuff out where we release it to 5%, then 10%, and et cetera, as well as techniques like dog fooding, which is essentially what I described with that Google example where you use your own product. That works great if you are your customer. Even if you're not, you can still dog food, but I think we're going to start to see the rise of more and more of those types of techniques. They will become the more dominant practice. Of course, it's all contextual. That's the hard part. You've got to work out based on your context. But I think that is another fundamental change that I'm starting to see happen inside the product world. And that's it. That is 5 ways I think product management is going to change in 2025. Of course, these aren't new things. I don't make my predictions based on wild guesses. They're all based on things that I've observed and data that I've seen over time. And if you enjoyed this video, you're going to enjoy my look back at 2024 that I'll throw right here. I basically went through all of my newsletter posts, this channel, the millions of impressions that I've got across all my content in 2024, and pulled together the top 5 things that resonated with you. Definitely give that one a watch. And thanks as always. I'll see you at the next one.